And welcome back. I'm Joe Rockey here with Local Football Flavor. And in this episode, we're going to break down the Denver Broncos, starting with why you should pay attention to Local Football Flavor, what makes us successful, what makes it work here. Then we're going to dive into the fantasy component of the Denver Broncos, concluding with the bets. Now, what makes Local Football Flavor unique and powerful in our information that gives us the results of 60% against the spread when the Hall of Fame number is 66, and gives us all but 3 of our regulars winning their league championship, is that we actually look at people who are putting their money on the table, the educated bettors that are putting it out there, opposed to just clickbait from ESPN and the rest of the internet. So when you look at this and go, wow, this is actually a lot of power here when you're getting the results, even though we're about to talk about a team that's, let's face it, not super sexy, in the Denver Broncos. That's where Russell Wilson became an un-Hall of Famer. Maybe Sean Payton's doing the same thing. But, Bob, where would you want to start with the Denver Broncos in our fantasy spectrum?
So one of the discussions that a lot of content creators are having out there are about the Denver Broncos running backs, but that's not the place we're going to start. The place we're going to start is the quarterback room, this quarterback situation in Denver. In Denver right now, they have 3 quarterbacks. We are pretty much known knowns on Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson came over the summer. He's pretty much right now listed on the ESPN depth chart, the 3rd stringer. We know what we get out of Zach Wilson. Second, we have Jarrett Stidham, number 2 on the depth chart right now. But again, it's early in training camp. It's really hard to figure out who's doing what right now. And then we have the starter, Bo Nix. Now, Bo Nix is coming out of Oregon, and Oregon tends to have one of those offenses that always pushes the ball downfield. Bo Nix is an electric player. He is one of those players that when you look at things on paper, you're like, I want this guy on my team, right?
Sure.
There's nothing. He led the nation in total touchdowns, broke the Oregon single season record for passings, completions, and passing touchdowns, and he didn't throw a lot.
Was that Herbert's record?
I'm not quite sure. It could have been.
Okay.
I hope it was like Joey Harrington's record. That would have been crazy. But
flashback to Detroit, baby.
When we look at it too, this is a guy from one of my favorite teams, Auburn, coming over from Oregon. That he didn't have such a great career at Auburn. Started as a true freshman. There were some learning curves. And, you look at it and you say, he's an experienced player. He's an experienced player. He's been in college for, it feels like, forever, right? And you say to yourself, okay, well, what does that experience get me? What does that experience, how is that different than a Jaden Daniels? How is that different than a J.J. McCarthy? How is that different than a Drake May? Well, experience can bite the Denver Broncos in the butt, kind of, right? They went after
Daniel Jones in New York.
They went after a guy like Paxton Lynch a couple of years ago out of Memphis, and a little bit of an experienced guy as well, but didn't quite get that level of competition in college, right? So, what can we project out of Bo Nix coming out right now? And he's not projecting really well, right? When we look at fantasy quarterbacks, he's going off the board Fantasy Pros as QB 31. He's at quarterback 22, however. And one of the reasons why is that their future isn't in Zach Wilson. Their future isn't in Jarrett Stidham.
Yeah.
Their future right now is in Bo Nix, and it would behoove them to continue to build a team around what this guy does well. This guy can run. This guy can pass. And what do we always say about quarterbacks in fantasy? We want a quarterback that's capable of running and is pretty good at passing. Well, this guy is able to do both, and he's ranked so low. And so for me, if I'm looking at anybody really out of the Denver Broncos, Bo Nix isn't really a sexy pick, right?
No, he's not.
In best ball, you feel comfortable projecting him as a 3rd starter or as a 3rd quarterback on your team?
Maybe a super cheap stack.
And he allows for a couple different builds, right? So, Courtland Sutton is going off the board as wide receiver 48, Troy Franklin, wide receiver 74, Marvin Mims, wide receiver 76. And while it's really hard to say, the value of these guys, because Russell Wilson did really push that ball toward Courtland Sutton's way. So Courtland Sutton's value could be a little bit different this year. But with these rookies like Troy Franklin, you look at it and you say, well, a guy like that, if you pair him with Bo Nix as a late stack, if you hit, you are golden.
You hit big,
right?
Because here's the issue Denver has, and all of their players, is that collectively as a team, they're projected to be the third worst scoring offense in the NFL. And if you don't score points in real life, it's very hard to score fantasy points. It's just the way that it is.
And one of the things that we know is that they got a new OC in Luke Getsy, and we know that Getsy is nothing super exciting. He's not creative.
No, he's not.
It's nothing to kind of write.
But we also know that Payton hated Russell Wilson because he was pushing the ball downfield to be exciting.
Exactly. And so we know that this is going to be a challenging situation to own a lot of these Denver players. But it does begin with Bo Nix here. And if Bo Nix can turn around a good year, you're getting him, in the 16th, 15th
super late
rounds of drafts. It's worth a flyer, especially in best ball. And I think out of most of the Denver players, that I am really enamored with the fact that he's going so late and that I can get him so late and build a small stack, whether that's Bo Nix with Mims, Bo Nix with Sutton, Bo Nix with Franklin.
See, I love the one with Sutton. I think Sutton, if he doesn't get traded, the Sutton stack with Nix gives you really potential here, because let's face it, Sutton's still a very talented receiver. He just lost the corkscrew that was holding him back. That cork has popped off in Jared Jeudy departing. Sutton has the potential of popping off. And the silver lining, the optimism for the Broncos is last year when we were doing these reports, Houston was basically in the same department.
Right.
And what happened? Collins gets an excited, huge boost because their quarterback comes in and hits their system. Now, it is very clear that the Broncos want to elevate through the short passing game. I get that sentence doesn't make sense, but it's what they want to do. Sutton is the one who's built for that, because both Mims and Franklin are over the top. That's how they play. I will tell you this. So you're looking at running back chuck downs or Sutton, and there's a great potential here. But we only have 5 left because this is the short one, remember.
When it comes to other Denver players that are kind of not on the map, other content creators will talk to you about Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, and most content creators will be on the vein that Audric Estime, coming off the injuries, coming out of Notre Dame, is kind of the guy you kind of want to get. Javonte Williams is pretty good value, but a guy that nobody really is talking about, and is not ranked in our rankings, and his tight end 35 is Greg Dulcich. Greg Dulcich is a player that, coming back from an injury, where the injury happened at a time, he's coming back. People are expecting a big breakout. Denver itself is expecting a big breakout, and we do know that when we're hearing chatter from camp that's saying we want to go with short intermediate passes, we want to go with passes through the middle of the field and stuff, those passes tend to go towards tight ends.
That's right.
And this is a player that when we look at a couple years back, we were like, wow, this was a player that people were talking about. And he's third year, fair share targets. He could be a go-to piece here. And he's a tight end that you can have in the last round of your drafts. And like I said, if you're building this really cheap stack, especially in best ball, this Bo Nix, Greg Dulcich, while it's not probably going to pay off tremendously every week, you could potentially get a tight end 1, tight end 2 performance from Greg Dulcich maybe 3 weeks out of the year, and nobody will be expecting it. And if you have him on your team, you probably won that. You probably will win that part of the week.
It's also a team, like I said, most people aren't looking a lot at from a total season-long victory standpoint. It's hard to win a lot of games when you're projected to be the 30th best offense and the 25th defense. You're letting up a lot of points and you're not scoring a lot. And when we look at this division as a whole, we're giving the Denver Broncos a 13% chance of walking away with the division. We're projecting them to score between 4 and 5 wins, leaning much closer to 4 total wins on the season. So when you look at the Broncos overall, that's the baseline to be able to do your bets off of. Can you make money on a low over-under? Sure can. Can you make money on pulling out these guys with cheap stacks with Bo Nix? You're talking about catching in the right spot. You absolutely can. There are plenty of weeks where these guys are playing other horrendous defense, Vegas. And when you look at this, Bo Nix and a Dulcich stack can win you a DFS setup. It's something that can be done, something to keep your eye on, that even the teams that are not going to be contending for the playoffs, more likely contending for the first pick overall, there's value there. And when you look at this, I would not shy away from, as you said, Bo Nix. I personally love Sutton in the stack because, again, Sutton's going to have to be their chain mover. He's basically going to have to be Keenan Allen with a quarterback that wants to throw it low and a coach that wants to throw it low.
And to be honest, he's most likely going to end up somewhere between 800 and 1,000 yards, and where you're drafting him at. He's one of the last of the wide receiver ones that are left on the board at the time. And unless Troy Franklin emerges as a rookie, unless Josh Reynolds emerges on the team, or a big injury happens, Courtland Sutton has a pathway to get 800 yards, 7 touchdowns at the bare minimum. Because I don't think,
he also has a pathway of replacing any other stud receiver that gets injured at the trade deadline.
Yeah, so there's a very good chance that can happen as well. So, I mean, setting yourself up with Sutton in, like the 10th, 11th, 12th round.
Super undervalued relative to his talent level.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys for watching, team players. Make sure you click subscribe, and we'll be with you winning more money as the season goes on.
Welcome